Hello everyone. It's late, the doors are locked, but something is still moving in the dark. Welcome. If you dare to keep listening, hit like and subscribe for more stories that will haunt your nights. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Now get comfortable and relax. Story 1. The letters never stopped coming. I didn't keep the first letter. I wish I had. Back then it was just a crumpled page with 2 misspelled words and a smiley face drawn like a sideways 8, a child's attempt at being funny. We were in 3rd grade, and Mrs. Paxton said writing to strangers would make us curious about the world. We were told our identities would be private, exchanged through a stack of manila envelopes and a volunteer at the district office. We wrote about our favorite foods and cartoons and what animals we wanted to be. I picked a hawk. The letter back said hawks have good eyes, and that they can see secrets. My name is Ethan. I grew up outside of Pittsburgh, the kind of neighborhood with mailboxes that lean a little and driveways that crack under the same winter every year. I can tell you the exact place I stood when the last day of the Pen Pal program ended, blacktop recess, near the basketball hoop that rattled in the wind. I remember kicking grit with my sneaker and feeling that small, unscratchable itch of disappointment, like when summer ends early and you didn't get to jump in the deep end one more time. Everyone traded stories about their pen pals written on wide-ruled paper. Some kids had drawn pictures. One girl said hers sent a pressed flower. Mine had sent a picture of a mailbox that looked exactly like mine. I didn't know that wasn't normal yet. The project stopped in March. The letters didn't. The next envelope came in April with a stamp of the Statue of Liberty, the kind that had already been used before it got to me. The glue around it tasted like old pennies. I know because I was still a kid and I still did kid things like lick the corners to see if they'd stick on my notebook. On the front, my name was written in the wrong order. Cole, Ethan, and the street number had a little ring drawn around it, like the sender wanted to make sure they hit the target. Inside was a page that smelled faintly like wet cardboard. Hi Ethan. I can still write you, right? The woman at the office said the project ended but we can be regular friends. Do you want to be regular friends, like not school ones? Tell me anything you want. I'm listening. Your friend. Jay. I showed Mom. She looked at the postmark and frowned. No return address, huh? Then she smiled, the way people do when they're trying to make a feeling into something smaller. It's probably one of those kids who doesn't have the right envelopes. I'll tell Mrs. Paxton you got another one. Maybe they forgot to shut it down. She called the school. The school called her back. The school said they'd ended the program completely and shredded the spare labels. No one was supposed to have my name. But the letters kept coming. They never said much at first, just little things. Which cartoons did I watch? Did I ride the bus or walk? Was it scary to see the forest behind our fence when it was foggy? Did I ever hear the one owl that hooted twice, then went silent? I think that owl sees very well, one letter read. I think it sees you. I wrote back anyway. I wrote because when you're 9 you think the world is mostly safe and adults have the keys to all the locked doors. I wrote because I was a hawk, in my head anyway, and hawks don't get scared of small animals buried in the dark. I wrote that I watched Hey Arnold, and I liked grape popsicles and my dad had a truck that made the back end bounce. I wrote that I wanted to be a forest ranger and learn the names of every tree. The reply came on paper torn from a ledger. The lines were smaller, the ink darker, like a grown-up had written it with their hand hunched into a claw. Those are good things, Ethan. You will be a good ranger. I know this, because you are careful. I saw how you put the latch on the back gate when it swings wrong in the wind. Your dad's truck has a silver toolbox in the back and a sticker on the bumper that you peeled off. The sticker glue is still there. I touched it. I didn't show that one to Mom. I told myself the pen pal lived near someone with the same truck, that maybe our neighborhood wasn't special, that maybe lots of back gates rattled in that same late winter wind. The world is big. The world repeats itself. That's what I told myself, until the letter in June. Hi Ethan. Today you lost your red yo-yo behind the neighbor's peonies. You didn't tell anyone. You put your hand in the dirt and it made a shape like a snail shell. You looked at your hand and then you touched your mouth and got soil on your lip. I laughed, but not at you, just because your face looked like you'd eaten a secret. Also tonight your dad checked the smoke alarm in the hallway and it beeped 3 times and you did a little jump and said, God. Your mom laughed but she looked tired. You should help her with the cans when she asks. I know you will. I pressed my finger to the paper and left a dry, gray smudge, pencil, not pen, rubbed with a fingertip. The handwriting was careful, like someone had practiced. The letter ended with a drawing this time, a little box with a flag on a stick. Inside the box, where letters go, the pencil had been pressed so hard it ripped the paper. I started keeping the blinds closed after that. I started shutting the bathroom door even when no one was home. I stood at my bedroom window at night and stared at the dark slice of trees between our fence and the ravine. Whisper, there are so many windows to look out of, and only one of me to look back. The summer wore itself into August. Dad got a night shift at the mill for a while and Mom taught summer reading at the middle school, which meant some evenings I sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and the taped hum of the box fan to keep me company. That was when another envelope came, pushed under the front door even though we still had a mailbox. The stamp was missing this time. The crease on the flap was slick with sweat. Hi Ethan. Do you like summer rain? I like how it sounds on the thin part of the roof above your shower. It's louder there, because the rafters aren't close. I know you like it too. You stood still and you smiled a little tonight when the rain came down. You turned your face toward the vent and you breathed in the cold air and you got goosebumps and you laughed but you didn't tell anyone why. I circled the address line with my finger until the paper went soft, then I walked to the bathroom and climbed into the tub and looked up. There's a tiny crack in the ceiling near the vent, a hairline where the paint bubbles when the steam builds up. I thought of an eye. I thought of a mouth pressed to the metal slats of the vent, not to see, just to listen. I thought of a person standing on the attic joists, holding their breath so the wood wouldn't complain. Breath unsteady. That night I pulled the hallway chair under the attic hatch and yanked the string. I told myself I'd peek and then shut it and forget. But the ladder creaked and the air above smelled like cold dust. My flashlight beam found the low slope of the rafters and a fat moth circling the light like it wanted to be closer to the sun than it ever could. I panned the beam to the bathroom vent and saw, insulation, a dead wasp, a nail head flashing like an eye. Wood. Nothing else. Nothing else but a folded index card with tape on one end, stuck to the beam just beyond the ladder. The tape was soft with attic heat. On the card, a pencil mark drawn so hard it left a ridge. It was the number of our house. Under it, the word, home. I spent that night sitting up. Mom found me on the couch at 5 in the morning with the TV playing a church program and the volume turned down to a whisper. She made me eggs and asked if I wanted to talk. I didn't know what to say that didn't sound crazy. I said I was sad the project ended. She kissed my head and said she missed being a kid too. School started. 4th grade made everything a little smaller, the problems, the lunches, even the handwriting in the margins, and yet the letters got bigger. They began to include things I hadn't told anyone, things I had carefully folded into my ribcage like paper fortunes. Hi Ethan. Do you remember the time you hid in the rack of coats during hide and seek and your breath made the sleeves move, and you didn't cough because you didn't want to be found? I was there. You were so good at being small. You made yourself like a leaf. Hi Ethan. The people on your street who have the dog with 3 legs ordered pizza twice this week. You took the coupon out of their mailbox and you put it in your pocket and then you put it back because you are good. I watched you do that. I like how you think. Hi Ethan. I know your middle name. I like your middle name. It is a strong name. Strong names belong to boys who can keep promises. We have a promise, right? I tore that one in half. Then I taped it together because I realized tearing it made it worse, like splitting a worm and letting both halves crawl. I put it in a shoebox in my closet with a rubber band around it and added a heavy book on top like gravity could hold fear flat. The book didn't help. The space under my bed grew deeper every time I turned off the light. In winter, Dad's night shift ended and he took to checking the doors before bed. He said a guy a few streets over had had his shed broken into. He clicked the deadbolt and said, "People get desperate when it gets cold." I thought of people like metal, shrinking when temperatures drop. I thought of people like breath, hanging where you can see it if you look from the right angle. In February, I found a Polaroid in our mailbox with no envelope. It was a picture of our backyard, snow smooth as cake frosting, except for one set of prints walking from the tree line to stand just under my bedroom window. They weren't boots. They were sneakers. The print between the ball and the heel was worn thin. On the back, in pencil. Hi Ethan. I wanted to show you how close I can be. Do you ever get cold, right before you fall asleep? I do too. I took the photo straight to Dad. He held it by one corner like it might smudge his fingers if he touched more of it. He looked at me hard, then at the window, then back. Did you do this? He asked, not angry, scared. I shook my head. He nodded once like the world had just given him a second option he didn't want. Okay, he said. Okay. He called Officer Narvaez, who lived 3 blocks down and who was known mostly for telling kids to slow down on their bikes. He came over and looked at the snow through the window, then at the photo. He said he'd drive by more often. He said, probably just some high schooler messing around. He said, we'll keep an eye. Keep an eye, like that hawk. Spring didn't make it better. The envelope stopped using stamps altogether. Sometimes I'd find one folded into the hedge. Once I found one in the shopping cart at the Giant Eagle while Mom loaded milk. My name was written smaller every time, as if the person expected our mail carrier to read lips. Inside, the letters turned into instructions that pretended to be questions. Hi Ethan. Can you count to 200 with your eyes closed and not lose track? Try it tonight while you're in the bathroom brushing your teeth. I want to see how you do. Hi Ethan. Do you ever leave your window open a little for fresh air? It smells good at night this week. Try it. I think you'll sleep deeper. Hi Ethan. Can you put your blue baseball cap on your doorknob one night so I can tell when you're asleep? I want to guess if I know your time. I didn't do any of those things. I double-checked the windows. I slept with the fan on even when it was cool because white noise felt like a wall. Still, the letters kept describing thoughts I hadn't said out loud. Hi Ethan. You think about leaving the light on in your closet to make the shadows smaller. You think I don't know that. I do. I see the line of light on your carpet. I started writing back again, a cornered animal with a pencil. I wrote that I would tell my dad. I wrote that I would call the police myself. I wrote that I would start sleeping in the living room with the TV on and a pot and pan on my chest like armor. I didn't send those. I burned them in the sink and watched the edges curl, watched the words go from mine to something no one could ever read, and felt a low, mean relief until I realized smoke has a way of getting everywhere. The last week of 5th grade, there was a field trip to Laurel Caverns. I tried to sit near the middle of the bus, away from the windows. I counted the bolts on the floor to calm down. Mrs. Paxton's replacement, Mr. Hanley, a man with a soft voice and wrists that looked like they'd been sunburned in a past life, came and sat in the seat across from me. "You don't like caves?" he asked. I said I didn't know. He nodded. "Good answer. That's what caves like to hear. Some teachers put their hand on your shoulder when they talk to you. He didn't. He kept his hands folded on his knee, and his right thumbnail was worn down low, like he chewed it when the world got loud. Near the end of the tour, the guide turned off all the lights. The dark tasted like pennies and stone. People giggled because you have to laugh when you feel like a small dot. In the dark I heard a voice near my ear that wasn't the guide and wasn't Mr. Hanley and wasn't one of my friends. It was a whisper, an intake of breath right against the softness under my jaw. "You're very good at being still," it said. "You can do 200 easily." I didn't move. I didn't scream. I counted to 5 by feeling my tongue against my teeth. When the lights came back, everyone looked the same. The floor looked the same. My skin did not. That summer Dad installed motion lights out back and put a padlock on the gate. He taught me how to check a car's wheel wells with a flashlight before getting in, which he pretended was about snakes. The letters slowed for a while, like tides. Then, in August, a package arrived with no postage, just my name. It was heavy, a weight that told me something inside had mass, something that took up the kind of space that doesn't go away when the lid is closed. Mom said not to open it. She set it on the counter while she stirred sauce and said Dad would look at it when he got home. I waited 8 minutes, then slid a butter knife under the tape and lifted. Inside were 100 pages, maybe more, all with nothing but my name written in pencil, over and over, until the graphite got lighter and the letters got thinner and the final page was almost blank, the pressure marks deep enough to be read with your fingers. At the bottom of the last page, "You are always going to be my favorite. Please don't forget." Mom made a sound people make when they burn themselves. Dad took the box into the garage. The next day, he met Officer Narvaez on our curb and they talked for a long time with their arms crossed and their mouths small. Dad came in and said sometimes people do things to feel powerful and it's not about us, it's about them. He asked me if I wanted to move. I said I wanted to not exist for a week. He laughed once, then he sat down hard. Middle school did the thing it does where it rearranges your lungs so jokes come out weird and sudden. I grew taller. I learned the slow art of not looking afraid in a hallway. I learned that there are 100 disguises for loneliness and most of them get good grades. The letters changed too. They got cheerful sometimes, almost sweet, the apology of a person who believes that capital letters equal love. "Hi Ethan. I got a job. I can buy better paper now. I can buy stamps if I need to. But I don't. Isn't that funny? I don't need to. Hi Ethan. I passed your bus stop today. I didn't say hi because I wanted you to not feel embarrassed in front of your friends. I am thinking about your feelings. I am good at that. I know when your feelings happen before you do. Hi Ethan. Did you like the thunder last night? The windows rattled on your street in a way that felt new. I liked that too. I told Megan, a girl in my science class who plucked the strings of her hoodie when she thought too fast, because I needed to tell someone who wasn't family. She said it didn't sound real, then she saw my face and put her hand on her notebook and said okay, she believed me, and that I should tell the police again. She said her cousin had had a stalker and he'd left stuff in their bird feeder. She said that sometimes you have to be loud to make something big enough that other people see it. I tried loud. I told Officer Narvaez about the package, the cave whisper, the vent, the photo. He filled out a form with blue ink and asked if I'd ever given out my address online. I said we didn't have a computer. He asked if my parents had enemies. I said no. He asked if I'd ever seen anyone watching the house. I said only in my head. He said to keep the letters. He said not to respond. He said predators like to be fed. The word stuck in my teeth. Predator. Like a hawk. Like something above, not below. High school gave me a license and a job bagging groceries and the small, dangerous sense that the world could be outrun if you just drove fast enough into the rain. The letters turned into fewer pages with more, white. As if the sender had learned that silence has more weight than words when it's put in an envelope. Hi Ethan. You left your back window open last week. You slept through a storm. You looked so tired. I wanted to help. I closed it for you. I hope you didn't mind. Hi Ethan. Great job on your math test. I know you were worried. You like to double-check even the things you know. That's good. That's how you survive. Hi Ethan. You are taller than your dad now. You should stand at the window at night so I can see that again. I started sleeping at friends' houses more. I told my parents it was because we were cramming for tests or playing video games. Sometimes that was true. Sometimes I lay on a floor that smelled like different laundry detergent and counted the seconds between a furnace turning on and the floor vent clicking, and I would feel less seen for a while. I dated a girl named Lila for a month, and when we kissed behind the band room I kept my eyes open because closed eyes felt too much like windows. She said I made her feel like a ghost. I said sorry. She said she'd be okay. She said, whatever this is, I hope it lets you sleep. Senior year, a letter came that wasn't to me. It was to my mom, folded into a Target circular like a coupon. She found it while clipping deals on paper towels. She showed it to me with 2 fingers. Hi Mrs. Cole. I wanted to say you are a good mother. You keep the house clean and you check the oven twice. You always tie the trash tight. You were pretty when you cried by the sink last week and you didn't make a noise. You should sleep more. I can help with that if you need it. My mom's face looked like someone had taken an eraser to it. She sat down so slowly I thought she might miss the chair. Dad called 911. The officer who came was not Narvaez. He was younger and said words like documentation and escalation. He told us about a P.O. box we could set up. He told us about cameras. He said not to leave the letters on the counter where you can see them because sometimes ghosts are made of paper. He said a lot of things that sounded like help and felt like air. Graduation came and I left for college 3 hours away in Columbus because distance felt like armor you could measure on a map. My dorm smelled like dry cereal and dust and the window looked out at a brick wall. I loved that wall. I loved how solid it was, how utterly uninterested in my middle name. For a month, nothing came. Then a postcard arrived with a photograph of the Allegheny River at sunset. The back had 5 words, each written on its own line so it would take longer to read. Hi. Ethan. I found you. The postmark was local to Columbus. I sat on my bed and listened to the hum of the vending machine down the hall and felt my throat do the small, useless swallow people do when there's nothing in their mouth. I wanted to tell my roommate, Tyler, the kind of guy who kept his socks in careful rolls, that I was a magnet and I didn't know why. Instead I said I had to go home for the weekend. I drove back to Pittsburgh listening to talk radio with the volume low, not because I cared about the host, but because voices make you feel like you're part of a conversation you can survive. Home smelled like furniture polish and the faint metal of the new deadbolts. Mom had gotten her hair cut short. Dad had put a wooden dowel in the track of the sliding door like a joke about safety that wasn't a joke. On Sunday, we ate pancakes and pretended we didn't look at the mailbox every time a car drove past. I left before dusk because I wanted to be on the highway when it got dark, where dark is thick but anonymous. When I unlocked my dorm room, another postcard lay on my desk under the edge of my keyboard. The photo was of a hawk on a fence post. On the back, "I like your schedule." I sat down on the thin blue carpet and I let the card fall and I let whatever had been holding my ribs together come apart. Voice trembling, I cried hard, that kind of ugly way with your nose making a whistle and the back of your neck getting hot, and I didn't try to be quiet because the point of crying is not to win. Tyler came in, stopped dead, crouched, and put a hand on my shoulder the way Mr. Hanley never had. I told him everything. I told him about the owl and the vent and the cave and the sneakers and the 3-note smoke alarm. He didn't call me crazy. He didn't try to fix it. He said, "We're going to report this to campus security. And I'm going to get you coffee. And then we're going to move your bed away from the window." Campus security was 2 officers and a desk with a bowl of mints. They took the postcards and said they'd notify the city PD. They gave me a number to call. They said to keep my room locked, as if anyone on earth has ever wanted something more because a lock existed. I slept 2 hours at a time for weeks. I dreamed in graphite. I flinched at mail slots. When the 3rd postcard arrived, a picture of a handprint in wet cement, there was a note attached by a paperclip, neatly typed. "Mr. Cole, we have reason to believe the person contacting you is using the internal mail system to bypass the U.S. Postal Service. We are investigating. Please do not attempt to engage. Dean's office." That night I heard footsteps in the hallway at 3:14 a.m., not hurried, not slow, considerate, like someone carrying a glass of water. They paused outside my door. The handle made a sound like someone thinking. Then the footsteps moved on. I lay still and counted to 200 with my eyes open. By Thanksgiving, I had developed a habit of reading my textbooks out loud to myself so that my own voice would be the last thing I heard before sleep. Mom said she was proud of my grades. Dad offered to drive up and bring my old baseball bat to keep by the bed. I told him not to. I told him I was fine. He didn't argue, which scared me more than if he had. The night before I drove home, a letter slipped under my door. Not a postcard, a full page, the paper thick and cream-colored like something you'd use for good news. The handwriting looked like it had taken an hour. "Hi Ethan. Do not be mad. I am helping you. You are not good at sleeping. You leave your mouth open and you make a little sound like you are learning to say something and then forgetting the word. I wake up sometimes too. I watch you so you won't be alone in that. I am writing to tell you I am going to be closer again soon. I have missed our old way. That will be nice for Christmas. You will feel me and understand. I am very proud of your quiet. Your friend, J." I took the letter to the RA. She said she'd call. She did. The next day a cop walked me through my room like a realtor and told me to put a dowel in the window track. He asked if I had any enemies. I said just one. He smiled. He said that's funny. I didn't laugh. He asked if I wanted to spend the night somewhere else. I said home. He said good plan. I drove through a snow that started like static and turned into a decision. The wipers smeared the world into fat, white streaks. On I-70, a semi kicked slush against my windshield so hard I thought the glass would give. I stopped at a Sheetz and bought coffee that tasted like a promise someone intended to keep. I made it home at 2 a.m. Mom put both her hands on my face in the entryway. Dad stood behind her with his jaw set and his eyes doing math. I slept on the couch with the TV on and the volume at 5. 5 is quiet but alive. Christmas taste tested the year and found it strange. We opened socks and laughed too loudly. Aunt Ginny came over and told a story about a raccoon and a garbage can like it was a sermon. It snowed. The house was so warm the windows sweated. I went to bed early because I didn't want to see how my parents checked the locks when they thought I wasn't looking. I woke at 3:07 a.m. to the sound of paper sliding like a whisper against teeth. Not the front door, closer, thinner, the frost line of sound you can only hear when you are absolutely awake. I sat up and felt the weight of being a body. The paper slid again. I got out of bed and followed it, down the hall, past the bathroom, past the thermostat that glowed a steadfast 68. To my childhood bedroom door. In the gap beneath it, a page, slow, careful, a hand on the other side using 2 fingers so the edge wouldn't bend. I didn't say anything. I knelt. I let the page come halfway. I pinched it and pulled. It resisted for a hair. Then it let go. Hi Ethan. Good night. I put my mouth to the crack and said, whisper, who are you? No answer. Just breathing, mine and someone else's. I stood up and grabbed the knob and yanked the door open. The room was empty. The window was shut. The closet door was closed the 2 inches my mom always preferred, insisting it kept air moving. The floor was clean. The bed was made. The only thing out of place was the vent cover in the baseboard, which sat at a slight angle, like a picture frame someone straightened but didn't fix. Breath shaky, I reached for it. The screw on the left had been unscrewed 3 turns. The one on the right was tight. I set the vent aside and looked into the dark rectangle. Cold air breathed out. I put my hand in, elbow deep. I felt insulation. I felt the smooth side of the duct. I felt paper. A stack, elastic with weight. I pulled. It came free like a tooth. Inside the vent were dozens of letters, some in envelopes, some loose, all addressed to me. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. Mixed in were Polaroids curled from heat. One was my face, asleep, my hair pushed up by the pillow. One was my mom at the sink, her eyes shut. One was the back of my dad's head as he watched a game, a beer in his hand. The last was a blank wall with a shadow that might have been me and might have been nothing. I heard a sound then, the softest scrape, like denim against wood, from the other side of the wall. The closet. The wall behind the hanging clothes. I stood and put my hand on the drywall. It felt like house, like paint, like every day. I knocked, once. The knock came back, exactly the same, but not mine. I didn't run. I don't say that as a brag. I say it because sometimes your body knows that if you move too fast you'll break. I walked to my parents' room and said my name out loud so my voice would be a rope back to knowing who I am. I said, Dad, wake up. I said, Mom, please. My dad came with the bat. Mom came with the phone already to her ear, 9-1-. We opened the closet together. We pushed the clothes aside. Behind the dresses and shirts, the drywall had been cut, not a big hole, not something obvious, a square the size of a shoebox lid, carefully scored and lifted, set back in place with 2 finishing nails pressed in just enough to hold. The space beyond was the void between studs, a little canyon of house bones. I put my eye to it and saw, darkness, the back of the drywall of the bathroom, a loop of wire, and a narrow path where the insulation had been pulled back, a crawl as thin as hunger. The police came. They were loud in the way people are when they're afraid of being quiet. They dusted the vent and the closet edge and the window locks. They talked in the hallway in low voices that made the words short. They didn't find anyone. They didn't find footprints in the snow because it had started again, new and clean, while we waited. They didn't find pry marks or ladders or anything but the letters, the photos, the hole, and the certainty that the world we lived in had more rooms than we'd rented. We spent that night at Aunt Ginny's. I didn't sleep. I watched the front door until dawn like a lifeguard who hates water. In the morning, a neighbor called to say there was paper all over our lawn. We drove back and found our yard freckled with white, pages blown from somewhere, some of them mine, the ones from the vent, some of them new. On the newest ones, written over and over in a hand I knew better than my own, were two sentences. I have always been here. You have always been here too. We moved in March. Not across town. Away. Dad said he didn't want to live in a house that had a throat. We packed as if speed could change shape. The last day, I walked through the rooms the way people do when they're trying to teach their eyes what goodbye looks like. In my old bedroom, the patch where the closet hole had been was smooth and white and small as a lie. I put my hand on it and felt nothing, which felt like a kind of mercy. The new house in Columbus was an apartment with 2 locks and a hallway that smelled like pasta sauce and laundry steam. The windows looked at other windows, and somehow that was better, the idea that if something watched me, it might be distracted by the next life to the left. For months, nothing came. I went to class. I learned the names of trees for real. Red maple. American beech. Eastern hemlock. I made flashcards that felt like prayers. In late May, after finals, a letter arrived in our new building's parcel locker. No name on the outside. No apartment number. Just the building's address. The envelope was thick and soft, like it had been carried inside a pocket until it learned the shape of a body. I took it upstairs. Mom said, "We'll open it together." Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photo was of a wall, close-up, with peeling paint. The paint was a yellow that reminded me of schools. In the center, scratched into the plaster, a word, my name, repeated until the flakes made a small drift at the baseboard. The letter said, "Hi Ethan. Walls are only secrets if you let them be. Thank you for finding the letters. That made you into you. It made me into me too. We are both very patient. I am near. We have always been neighbors. That is not scary if you don't turn on all the lights at once. I have learned to be quiet when other people are sleeping. You taught me. I am going to teach you something now. Listen carefully, you can hear me when you want to, you can stop hearing me when you don't. It is easy. You close the space between your teeth and you breathe through your nose and you count to 200 and then you look at the corner where the ceiling meets the wall and you think the word home until your eyes water. That's how I do it. You are doing so good. Your friend. Jay. Mom pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth. Dad took the photo and turned it over like a magic trick might fix it. It didn't. He called. They came. They said the right words and the wrong words. They said, "We have a case number." They said, "We will do more." The building installed cameras. The management put a sign in the lobby about loitering. A month passed. Then 2. The sound of mail sliding under our door went from thunder to weather. Sometimes I think of Jay in a way that doesn't make me feel like prey. I think of a child who wanted a pen pal and didn't understand the rules, who believed letters were like breathing, that if you stopped, it meant you'd die. I think of a person who learned what love is from a distance and didn't understand that distance is part of love. Then I think of a hand on my doorknob at 3:14 a.m. and I let that softness go. I am 26 now. I live alone. Top floor. 2 locks. Bar in the slider. I own a little machine that makes the sound of rain on a loop because rain is the only song I can listen to forever. I walk with my keys between my fingers in the parking garage even though I hate how that looks, like I am an idea of a person instead of a person. I still check the vents. Last week, I decided the shoebox should go. I took it from the back of the closet and set it on the table. I untied the string. I took out the letters, the first ones, the ledger paper, the Polaroids, the typed note, the vent pages that still carried the smell of old metal if I put my nose close and breathed in, which I did, because sometimes you need to know things are real by how they smell. Underneath, at the very bottom, something I hadn't seen before, because it hadn't been there before, a thin rectangle of drywall, painted the same flat off-white as my apartment. The edges were chalky, like it had been cut. In the center, in pencil, my name. Under my name, a small neat mouth of a sentence. Hi Ethan. I wanted to help you start. I stood up. I looked at every wall. I looked at the corners where dust makes those soft, gray commas. I looked at the place by the window where the paint is always a shade lighter because the sun edits time. I put my ear to the wall by the kitchen and I listened. Long pause, and I heard it, a small, dry sound, the careful hush of pencil on plaster, the act of writing itself, inside the skin of my house. I didn't call anyone. I didn't move. I thought of the hawk, the owl, the vent, the cave, the breath at my neck. I thought of names. Names matter. Names make a thing real within a circle instead of everywhere. I put my hand on the wall like it was a shoulder I knew. I closed my teeth, breathed through my nose, counted to 200. I looked up at the corner where the ceiling meets the wall. I thought the word, home, until my eyes watered. The sound stopped. The apartment went back to the sound of the refrigerator deciding, the pipes answering each other in their slow language. My hand left a print on the paint. I took it away. I sat down. At 3:07 a.m., the letters slide again. New paper. New edge. The world whispers along its old teeth. I am older now, but the sound is the same. I get up and meet it. I am not brave. I am practiced. I kneel and let the page come halfway. I pinch it. I take it. My name at the top. The handwriting careful as prayer. Hi Ethan. Good night. I stand with the letter in my hand, listening to 2 breaths, mine and someone else's, inch apart through wood and paint and whatever it is a house is made of besides faith. Whisper, I do not open the door. I do not turn on the light. I do not call out for help. Because here is the worst thing, and the truest, and the part that makes me come back to this page again and again. The letters never stopped coming, and sometimes when the world is very quiet and the night is so clean it feels like the first page of something. I am grateful for that little slide of paper, for the proof that I am seen, that I am not alone in the dark, that my life has a witness who knows the exact sound of rain on the thin part of the roof over my shower. I hate that I am grateful. I hate that I am grateful. Voice low, but hate is a kind of attention too, and attention is another kind of letter, and letters, I have learned, are how some people breathe. I set the new page on top of the stack. I smooth the edges until they make a clean, white block. I wash my hands. I turn off the faucet. I stand in the hallway and wait for the space under the door to go back to dark. Then I whisper, to no one and to someone, to the hawk and to the boy and to the person on the other side of the sheetrock who learned patience in a world that teaches speed. Good night. And I go back to bed, tasting pencil and winter air, and I sleep, not well, but enough, with my hand open on the covers as if I am holding a note I haven't read yet, as if I'm leaving room for one more line. Story 2. The sound that followed me. I didn't hear it at first, not the way you hear a car door slam or a neighbor's TV bleeding through the drywall. It was more like a hint of a thing, sound that didn't belong to any single object. I used to tell myself it was the house settling, the pipes, the old oak out front complaining to the wind. That was before I realized the sound didn't live in the house at all. It lived with me, and it moved when I moved. My name is Ethan. I rent the lower half of a split level on the edge of Golden, Colorado, 10 minutes from the highway and 2 turns from a gas station that always smells like burnt coffee and spearmint gum. I keep a quiet schedule. I work as a night stalker at a hardware store off Colfax, tons of pallets, metal clatter, barcode gun chirps. The kind of job no one asks about at parties because they forget you exist mid-sentence. I used to think that anonymity was a form of safety, you don't get noticed, you don't get in trouble. The sound cured me of that. It started in early fall, the kind of night where the sky over the foothills turns the color of cold steel and the air knifes through your hoodie if you aren't moving fast enough. I just finished a shift and was walking from the bus stop, a block of cracked sidewalk and someone's dead sunflowers bending toward the street like they wanted to hear secrets. I had my backpack over one shoulder, keys in my hand like little brass teeth, and the faintest impression that something had matched my pace a step behind my own. Not a person. If it had been a person I would have felt heat or shadow or that stupid, sticky paranoia you get when you know you're being watched. This wasn't that. This was a soft scrape, a hush of weight, a breath against the road that syncopated with my boots. Left, right, right. I stopped. The sound stopped. Not a fraction after. Exactly with me, as if we were a single animal learning a trick. You'll tell me that's normal, acoustics, echo, buses whispering tires on wet pavement. I told myself those things, too. I kept walking. When I reached my little half-house with its stubborn porch light and its peeling mailbox, I unlocked the door and stood perfectly still just inside the frame. Old refrigerators knock once they kick off. Baseboards pop after a day of sun. Houses breathe. My house did none of that. It held its breath with me, waiting, listening. I set my keys in the dish and heard it again, 2 bare sounds following where my feet had been 2 seconds earlier, like a ghost read the motion and arrived late. Not loud, not dramatic, but intimate, close, almost apologetic. I turned on every light. Kitchen. Living room. Bathroom with the loose towel bar. Bedroom where the window faces the neighbor's cedar fence. I checked the closets and under the bed and behind the shower curtain because movies teach you rituals long before they teach you sense. Nothing. I stood in the hallway and let my ears fill with the noise of the bulbs humming. Then I paced from the kitchen to the bedroom and back again, deliberately, counting under my breath. 1, 2, 3. 3 heartbeats after my third step, I heard it, soft, like a sock brushing laminate, following the path I'd just taken, 3 beats late, 3 steps worth of echo that didn't come from any wall. I slept with a lamp on. Didn't help. The sound liked light, or it didn't care about it. I couldn't tell. Somewhere around 4 I fell into a shallow drift and dreamed that my floor had become a frozen lake and someone was moving under the ice, matching my steps with their palm, skating in my wake while looking up with eyes they refused to blink. The next morning was orange and brittle. The hardware store still smelled like cardboard and oil. I told myself I was tired and that tiredness is a hallucination factory. On my lunch, I sat on a pallet of cement mix and scrolled through a feed full of videos where something moves only when the camera does. People love to scare themselves when they're safe. I guess it's practice. I didn't feel practiced. I felt watched by something that didn't watch at all, something that only listened and learned. I didn't say anything to anyone. Who would I tell? Mike, my shift lead, whose primary emotion is impatience. The landlord upstairs who coughs through walls. I put my head down and worked. That night, I took the bus home again. Leaves flicked over the pavement like dry fish. Same backpack. Same brass teeth for keys. Same broken sidewalk cratered by years of freeze and thaw. Halfway down the block, I realized I'd been bracing for it since I clocked out. Left, right, left. Then a softer left, a softer right, arriving after my own, invisible feet skimming the world I'd just pressed. I stopped. It stopped. We waited together, silent. A car drove past and washed me with the smell of hot engine and fake vanilla, and the moment it faded the quiet sharpened so hard I could hear myself swallow. I told the air, quietly, don't. I don't know why I said that, maybe to break the spell, maybe because something in me wanted to see if it would listen. The sound took one step. Gentle. Childlike. A toe finding bravery. Then nothing. I walked the rest of the way home with my fists in my pockets, shoulders up, eyes down, pretending to be the kind of man who doesn't run. Inside, lights, check closets, count steps. The counting made it worse. The numbers became an invitation, 1, 2, 3, please, follow me. There are small accommodations we make with fear. I started leaving the TV on at a low volume, the kind of murmur you get in waiting rooms. I dragged a dining chair into the bedroom and placed my boots on the seat like I was preserving their warmth. I slept in socks. I stacked books at the foot of the bed so I'd have to kick them if I jerked awake, an anchor to the body so I didn't float away. The sound followed the rearrangement without complaint. It kept the same 3-heartbeat delay, the same faithful tracking. I began to think of it as not hostile, not friendly, just attached. By the end of the week, it had learned a second trick. It would stop when I stopped, yes, but if I froze mid-step, heel hovering, calf tight, the delayed echo would still arrive and finish the motion I hadn't completed. Which meant it had committed to my decisions before I made them, or it was rehearsing a version of me that was always a fraction ahead. Friday night, rain came straight over the foothills like someone had tipped a city on its side and poured. The gutters sang. The bus windows blurred to watercolor. When I got off at my stop, the streetlights wore halos and the spaces between them went dark in a way that felt intentional. Every step splashed. Every splash had an answer, softer, not water, a bare pad landing in a place that only pretended to be wet. Hey, someone called from a lit porch. A woman in a robe and slippers, gray hair knotted at the crown. You all right? Yeah, I said, too fast. Just, tired. She watched me a moment too long. You live down there. She pointed toward my end of the block. Yeah. You're the one who walks at the same time every night. I guess. Something about her voice made me think of thermoses, dented, dependable, warm on the inside. Maybe vary it, she said. Things learn you if you're too regular. I smiled like that was a joke. Her porch light clicked off as I passed, and the dark felt like a mouth I'd walked into by mistake. By the time I reached my door, I was almost running. Inside, lights, keys, breathing, the chair beside the bed like a guard that already knows it won't stop anything. I woke at 3:11 a.m. I know the exact time because my phone was in my hand and the lock screen glow pressed blue into my palm. The apartment was silent. The rain had given up. I laid there on my back, listening so hard for the delayed steps that I made my own heartbeat sound like footsteps in my ears. But the echo didn't come. For the first time in days, the follower stayed away. I rose, careful, and padded to the kitchen for water. The floor was cold through my socks. The refrigerator sighed its long, gentle apology. I took one sip, another, and that's when I heard a sound that didn't follow me at all. It came from the hallway closet. Not a step. Not a scrape. Something like a fingertip resting on a string and drawing it tight. I turned, every part of me in argument. The closet door stood closed a polite inch. Do you know how many times you've left a door like that and never thought about it? Never. I reached out and eased it open. Coats. Vacuum. Box of Christmas lights that aren't mine. The small, claustrophobic smell of someone else's dust. I pushed the hangers aside, the metal clicking like teeth, and from far back, deeper than the wall should have allowed, came the slowest 2 steps I have ever heard. One, a long, patient slide. Then after a pause that made my stomach harden, the second. I shut the door. Not a slam, a decision. I slept sitting up. Don't ask me how. Something in the body knows when to simulate rest. When my phone alarm rattled my palm at 6:30, I stood too fast and all the blood in me traveled away from my head at once. I made coffee I didn't want and brushed my teeth while staring at the spot where the hallway meets the living room. I emailed Mike to say I needed a day. He responded with a single letter, K, and I felt both guilty and furious that the world is so easy to disappoint. I needed air, not the hum of bulbs, not the tasting fear that rooms get when you've warmed them too long with your breath. I put on my boots and my jacket and left. I walked without destination, past the gas station, past the little park with the duck pond that always smells like algae and pennies, up the hill where the houses get bigger and the fences taller. Golden is pretty in a way that makes you think bad things should happen elsewhere, somewhere flatter, grayer, more honest about what it is. But horror loves pretty. It loves to write itself in white paint. By the time I reached the trailhead at the edge of town, the sun had made a weak attempt at being yellow. A few early hikers nodded at me with that Western friendliness that doesn't require conversation. I stepped onto the path and felt the ground change its mind under my boots, dirt instead of concrete, intention instead of habit. I walked, not fast, not slow, counting my breath in groups of 4 like I'd learned in some video. The wind brought a smell of juniper and rock. I didn't hear anything strange, not for the first half mile, and then I made the mistake of thinking I was safe. Left, right. Then behind me, not on the path but to the side, among small trees that shivered even when the wind died, came that same soft rehearsal of my steps, 3 heartbeats late. I stopped and the brush made a sound like a secret being swallowed. I turned, slow, and saw nothing but the brown-green of scrub and the thin shine of a snake of water that had decided to be a creek without telling anyone. Do you want something? I asked. I meant it to sound strong, it came out like a kid pleading with a teacher he likes. The world doesn't care how you sound. A single pebble moved in the dust 8 feet to my right, a small, tidy roll, like a toe had pressed and released. I didn't wait for more. I walked back down, passing 2 hikers in matching windbreakers and a dog who looked at me and then back at the place behind me with a quiet, canine worry I'll never forget. That night, I heard it outside the apartment, pacing the sidewalk in front of my window, taking 3 steps after every one I took inside. It had learned a new map. It knew me in 2 dimensions now. I stood with my palm on the glass and felt the cold push the heat out of my skin, and then, there was a soft push back, 3 beats later, as if someone had put their hand where mine had been on an invisible sheet at the edge of the world. I didn't open the window. I don't think it wanted me to. I don't think it wanted anything except to be near the place where I had just been. Do you know how awful that is, to be haunted not by a face or a voice but by your own outline, a history so fresh it's still warm. I started recording on my phone. Of course I did. Proof is a salve. I walked from the living room to the kitchen and back, recording my steps, and waiting, and there, clean as a whisper, were the 2 follow-up sounds arriving on schedule. I replayed it wearing headphones, tugged the volume all the way to the edge, and I noticed something that made my tongue go numb. Under the second of the 2 soft echo steps, there was the faintest scrape like a nail that had grown too long and needed trimming. I sent the clip to nobody. Who would I trust to hear it right? Instead, I got in my car. It was nearly midnight, but there's a grocery store off I-70 that pretends it's still 3 in the afternoon forever. I pushed a cart with a wheel that had opinions and I bought normal things with my haunted hands: bread, eggs, coffee, batteries, a second flashlight I didn't need. The aisles were bright and full of the music they play to make you think you can afford to be alive. I lingered. Brightness can do that. When I finally went outside, the parking lot had gone almost empty and the air had that thin, Colorado cold that turns your nose to glass. I walked between rows of cars. My boots made that hollow lot sound, and 3 heartbeats later, there came the soft answer of steps that didn't echo off anything man-made. I stopped dead between a silver SUV and a pickup that had lived in mud recently. The follow step stopped dead, too. Way back near the cart corral, a young guy in a beanie pushed 5 carts together with his hip and didn't look up. "Okay," I said, too loud. "You win." Nothing. A bird called once from a light pole and then reconsidered life. I kept walking and my chest went tight in a way that tasted like metal. The steps followed. Up ahead, a woman had her trunk open and was loading water and paper towels in a slow, deliberate way that told me she was thinking about something else. When my path aligned with hers, she glanced over and we made the kind of eye contact strangers allow each other, half smiled. Here we are, nothing is wrong. I wanted to use her as a shield. I wanted the sound to collide with her reality and shatter. It didn't. It paused politely while I reached my car, and when I opened my trunk and set the bags inside, 2 heartbeats later there came the soft, late sound of someone else pretending to lift what I had already lifted. I drove home with my hands locked at 10 and 2 and my mouth doing a prayer I don't remember learning. The apartment felt both too small and too wide. I put the food away. I placed the batteries on the counter like talismans. I stood in the center of the living room and said, in a calm voice I had to build from scraps, "Stop." It took 1 step. Not 3 beats later. Instantly. Heel to floor, gentle, obedient. I didn't breathe. "Don't," I said. It took another step. The second was closer than the first. I went to the bedroom and shut the door and leaned my forehead against it and wished I had done 1,000 different things with my life. On the other side of the wood, 3 beats later, came 2 soft steps, as if a child had pressed the notion of feet against the idea of a hallway and found both to be good. I slept a dreamless, blank sleep courtesy of 2 pills I told myself were for a headache. When I woke, it was Sunday. The church down the road put its bells into the morning and a trail of cars obeyed. I made coffee. I showered. I watched sunlight test the window like a shy cat. The sound didn't come. I didn't trust that kind of mercy. At noon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't have saved. I let it go. Then I listened to the voicemail, a woman's voice, grainy with road noise. "Hi, my name's Allison. We haven't met. I live on Pine, near the corner. This is going to sound weird, but my mom likes to talk to strangers, and she said she told you something the other night. About varying your routine. Anyway. I'm calling because I've heard something, too. For a while now. And you walk past our house most nights, so if I'm wrong, just ignore me. But if I'm not wrong, call me back. Please. I stared at the number until the digits meant nothing. Then I called her. She answered on the first ring. Yeah, she said, as if she'd been holding her breath. This is Ethan, I said. The stranger your mom warned. I meant it to be light. It wasn't. She let out a small laugh that didn't trust itself. Thought I'd hallucinated that conversation. She's not usually mystical. What did you hear? I asked. Walking, she said. But not in the street, not on the sidewalk. In the... I don't know how to say this, in the places you already were. I sat down. The chair made a noise like a secret cracking. How long? A month, she said. Maybe more. I only noticed because I started running at night again, dumb, I know, and it felt like something paced me, but not like a person. Like when you walk on wet tile and then step onto dry floor and it stays darker where you were for a second. Like that, but with sound. We were quiet. Somewhere a truck coughed and moved off. My mom said you looked tired, she added. You still okay? I don't know, I said. Me neither. We met at dusk on the little green triangle that pretends to be a park. She was taller than her voice and wore a baseball cap that declared a college I didn't attend. We did that awkward wave strangers do when they've already decided to be allies. You brought a flashlight, she said, nodding at the one in my hand. I bring it everywhere now, I said. Like a toddler's stuffed animal. She snorted, honest, and then sobered like she'd broken a rule and didn't know if the rule applied. We started walking the perimeter of the grass. Kids had drawn a city in chalk, squares for buildings, lines for roads, a sun with rays like a crown. The air had that candy smell right before cold gets serious. We walked in silence long enough for two dog walkers to pass and rate us with a glance. Listen, she said finally. We stopped. 3 heartbeats later, in the place where we had just been, came the patter of 2 careful steps. She flinched, not the big theatrical jump, but the genuine, skin-close recoil of someone who isn't ready to be believed. You hear it? I asked. Yes, she said, and swallowed. And it started getting closer last week. Like, it's tired of late. We kept walking. The sound kept following. At the corner, a truck turned and washed us in temporary daylight. When the light left, the steps behind us felt eager, as if darkness nourished them. What if we run? She asked. What if that teaches it something new? I asked back. We didn't run. By the time we reached her block, porch lights were doing their best. Her mother's house had a set of ceramic geese by the steps, chipped and self-satisfied. The old woman herself waved from the door like we were late to a party and it had only her at it. You too, she said, as if that explained the world. We heard it, Allison told her. I know, her mother said. She looked over our shoulders at the empty space where the 2 delayed steps were about to arrive. I used to hear something like that, a long time ago. Your father hated when I talked about it. He said naming a thing is how it finds a seat at the table. What did you do? I asked. Moved, she said. And then we heard it there, too, now and then. Things that like you don't need an address. She invited us in for tea that neither of us wanted, and we sat in a living room where the furniture had chosen its positions when the house was new and never reconsidered. She told a story in fragments, a soft, late step that began after her sister died, a sound that waited outside bathrooms and beside beds, a night when it stood on the back steps and made the wood remember her weight before she placed it there. What is it? I asked. A rehearsal, she said. Of you. Or of something that wants to be you. Or of time itself, practicing before it unveils. You tell me which one is worse. We left with a Tupperware of cookies and a set of suggestions that felt like recipes for a storm. That night, the sound didn't wait outside my window. It stood in the kitchen with me, 3 beats late, 2 steps behind everything I did. I poured water. It rehearsed a pour that wasn't wet. I opened the cabinet. It opened a cabinet where only air lives. I tapped the counter twice and 3 beats later the counter remembered my knuckles and invented theirs. I recorded again. This time, I played the sound through a speaker and walked in silence to see if it would follow a version of me made of noise. It did. It loved me and didn't care if I was real. I don't know what made me try the basement. Maybe I thought it would hate stairs. Maybe I wanted to push it into a corner where sound dies. The door down there sticks at the frame and opens with a sigh like old lungs. Concrete steps. Naked bulb. A shelf with paint cans from 3 tenants ago. I stood on the 3rd step and said, "Stay." 3 beats later, the echo placed its foot where mine had been and waited. I lifted my heel, hovered, set it down on the 4th step. 3 beats later, the listener did the same. "Please," I said, and my voice had a shape I didn't recognize. The bulb flickered, once, the way bulbs do when you've been in a room too long and electricity gets bored. In that flicker, for the span of a blink you could fit with both hands if you were careful. I thought I saw dust move in the outline of legs a fraction behind mine. Not a person, a negative of a person. A subtraction. A refusal to be solid. I sat down on the step and cried in a dumb, choked way that embarrasses you even when you're alone. The echo sat when I stood. It always wanted the after, never the now. On Monday, I went back to work. You can't be hunted and unemployed. That's too much of one kind of danger. I stock shelves. I cut open boxes and feed the cardboard to a compactor that could flatten a car if you let it. Each time I slid a box forward on the shelf, 3 beats later something slid a box forward in a place where nothing sold. I moved faster. I dropped a wrench and it clanged and a customer 10 feet away said, "Whoa," like he'd forgotten he had a mouth. At lunch, I went out back where the loading dock stares at the pine scrub and the dumpster pretends not to be important. I stood beside the rail and watched wind take small bites out of the world. Behind me, the 2 steps came and stopped. I didn't turn. I said, "Quiet, if there's a way to be okay with you, teach me." The wind didn't answer. The steps didn't either. But when I took a breath so deep my ribs hurt. I heard a breath that wasn't mine gather in a chest that wasn't there and let itself go 3 beats later, as if learning the shape of hope. That night, I sat on the floor of my living room with the lights off. Phone face down. TV quiet. Street a suggestion. I said, into the dark, "Can you copy this?" and I clapped once, a sharp, single sound that left fingerprints on the air. 3 beats later, there was an answer. Not a clap, not quite. Something like hands that had studied hands, almost right, missing the small noise of skin. I clapped twice. The answer tried twice. The second landed closer. I whispered, "Closer," without meaning to. It obeyed. At 2:08 a.m., a knock came at the door, 2 knuckles, polite, the way a neighbor calls down a hallway. I went cold in a way that felt clean. 3 beats later, the second knock arrived, on the inside of the door. I didn't open it. I backed into the middle of the room and set my palms against my thighs to keep them out of mischief. The 3rd set of knocks came from the bathroom door, not a copy, original, as if the sound had tired of being late and wanted to try the now. Then silence, deep and costless. I said Allison's name like it was a spell that could make another person appear. No one appeared. I stood there until my back hurt from standing. I slept on the couch with my shoes on. By morning, nothing had moved. The kitchen was still a kitchen. The chair beside the bed had not learned to be a person. The mirror still refused to lie. I made toast and ate it standing up because the table felt like a stage and I didn't want to perform. I put my hand on the hallway closet door, the one with coats and lights and a deeper space than the wall should allow, and I said, no, I said it softly, not to the door, to myself. At work, Mike told me I looked like a peeled grape. I told him I'd sleep when the inventory did. He laughed the way men laugh when they don't know where to put concern. Allison texted around 4, it's at my place now. Steps in the hallway. Tried to call you. You okay? I wrote back, with me too. It knocked last night. From inside. She didn't answer for a while. Then, come over. I wanted to. I didn't want to, both truths were equal weights on a scale that refused to move. I packed a bag. Toothbrush. Shirt. Batteries because I am a cliché now. I walked the long way to her block, as if taking a route the sound didn't know would confuse it. It didn't. Every corner, 3 beats late, the rehearsal arrived. At her door, I raised my hand to knock and the second set of knuckles landed from the inside 3 beats later. She opened with a look like the second half of a bad sentence. We stood too close in the little entry, and behind her the house exhaled in a way that a house should not. In the hall, in the kitchen, at the foot of the stairs, wherever we had just been, the air finished our movements. We sat on the couch and left the center cushion empty because that felt like a rule you follow even if no one told you why. What happens if we stay still long enough, she asked. We become the echo, I said. Or the echo becomes the moment. Her mother knocked and came in with the authority of a woman who has lived 3 lives in one body. She carried a small tin and a prayer you could smell. I'm not going to pretend I know what this is, she said, sitting without asking where. But I know how to talk to it. Same way you talk to a stray that has chosen you. She opened the tin. Inside were slips of paper folded like secrets and a handful of salt that had convinced itself it was special. She took one slip, unfolded it, and read in a voice people save for graves. Words about boundaries, about doors, about what walks when called and what starves when ignored. Then she stood and walked to the doorway and pressed her palm in the air like she was closing something you couldn't see. 3 beats later, a palm pressed back from the other side of nothing. Her eyes filled and emptied without permission. Find the first place it learned you, she said to us. Stand there and tell it the truth. After she left, Allison and I looked at each other like we'd been given a map without a legend. The first place. My bus stop. Her driveway. The sidewalk under the dead sunflowers. The grocery lot between 2 cars. The hallway closet that goes too far. We chose the closet. Of course we did. The house knows where to point you. We stood in front of the door with our shoulders almost touching and our breaths learning each other. I opened it the polite inch. Coats. Vacuum. Lights. Dust that belonged to no one living. Deeper than it should go. I said, I'm Ethan. I'm not your now. I'm not your later. I'm not your practice. Allison said, I'm Allison. If you need someone, need the space we leave behind, not the people we are. 3 beats later, 2 voices repeated us, not voices, shapes of words made out of air that remembered where our mouths had been. It didn't get the names right. It made Ethan into something like even and Allison into saw sun, and somehow that was worse than accuracy. Go, I said. Please. Go, the air said, late, and then again, almost on time. We stood there until the coats stopped looking like people. We stood there until the vacuum stopped being a spine. We closed the door not with finality but with manners. That night, I tried not to listen. That is impossible. Hearing is a power you can't turn off without drowning it in noise. The steps came and went. Sometimes they were outside, sometimes inside, sometimes they decided that walls were optional and moved through in a way that made the studs remember pressure. I recorded and deleted, like confession. Near dawn, I fell asleep with the phone on my chest and dreamed I had taught a child to walk and the child had learned too well and refused to sit down. Days became points connected by the line of a thing I couldn't draw. I learned to cook while being mimicked by a silence that loved the smell of onions. I learned to shower while my afterimage learned to fog the mirror. I learned to live inside the parentheses of a pause. And then, something changed. The 3-beat delay collapsed to 2. Then, on a Tuesday when the sky over the foothills went bruise purple without rain, the delay became 1. I walked and the echo took 1 step, close enough to feel on the hairs of my arm. I set my hand on the back of a chair and the air set its hand there, too, warm with a heat that wasn't mine, late by a single heartbeat. I called Allison. She didn't pick up. I put on my boots with the awkward urgency of someone suiting up for a storm and ran the short distance to her house. The ceramic geese watched me commit to mistakes. The door was ajar. Inside, quiet in the loudest way. "Allison," I said, and the room said, "Saw son," 1 beat later, affectionate and wrong. I found her in the hallway, standing very still with both hands out like she was measuring a doorway. Tears had drawn 2 straight lines down her face, the kind that dry only when they want to. "It's with me," she said. "Close." I reached toward her shoulder and stopped, because the rule had always been to let the late decide. 1 beat later, something touched where my hand had almost been, not her, the place her shoulder would be if she moved toward me. "It's learning to arrive," she said. "What do we do when it catches up?" Her mother's tin sat on the table. The slips inside were patient. I took one at random and opened it to find a blank square. The top one had words. Below that, blank. "She writes them as she needs them," Allison said. "Most of the time she just holds paper and pretends." I thought about the first night, the porch light, the old woman's robe, the warning about routine. I thought about the basement bulb flicker, the outline made of dust. I thought about the knock that arrived from the inside of the door as if houses could make mistakes. "Maybe it doesn't want to hurt us," I said. "Maybe it doesn't know what hurt is," she answered. We stood there while the late placed itself beside us. 1 beat. Then none. For a breath, for a single, impossible blink, I felt fingers slide between mine, not squeezing, not claiming, just aligning, as if the world had offered me my own hand back after keeping it warm. I closed my eyes because people close their eyes when something important happens. When I opened them, the air in front of us had the faintest bend, the way heat above a road has a shape. It pulsed once, twice, and then it stepped forward, not late, not early, precisely with us. We didn't move. The room did. The light on the wall went soft and then returned. A coat sleeve in the closet twitched as if remembering wind. Somewhere close, our names learned how to be said and then forgot. I don't know what it is. A rehearsal, a double, a shadow that outgrew walls. I only know this, when I walk now, I am never alone. Not in the street, not at work, not in the rooms I pay to store my breathing. Sometimes I pause and let it pass through me like a river that cannot decide its banks, and sometimes I hurry, because there are days when I think if it ever arrives on time and stays, the world will split into 2 versions, one where I keep going and one where I become the place where sound rests. Tonight, as I write this, the window over my desk holds a reflection that is almost me. Not quite. The mouth is a fraction late. The eyes arrive just after. The fingers tap the wood and the second set of fingers taps, 2, 1 beat behind, 1 beat behind. If the tapping stops, if the fingers learn the rhythm and land with mine, if the knock comes from both sides of the door at once. I don't know what I'll do. Maybe I'll open. Maybe I'll let the world try me on. Maybe I'll step forward and hear no one follow, and that silence will be the scariest sound of all. Story 3. It watched from the foot of my bed. It started with the feeling that someone had learned my name from the inside of my skull, a small pressure, like a fingertip pushing on my thoughts, testing the give of them, then retreating when I turned on the lamp. I told myself it was stress. New apartment, new job, new city. People wake at night when everything in life is shifting. People imagine things in the dark. That first night, I breathed until the ceiling fan's shadow stopped looking like a rotating hand, until the numbers on the clock changed from 3:16 a.m. to 3:17 a.m. Until morning found me not rested but alive. The place was a second-floor unit in a narrow old house on Perkins Street, just off Elm in New Haven, Connecticut. The kind of neighborhood where maples crowd over brick sidewalks and the houses are close enough to share the smell of whoever is making coffee first. My bedroom faced the back alley and the narrow strip of yard below. From my window I could see the top of a rusted chain-link fence, a crooked shed, and past that the backs of more houses, windows stacked like teeth, blinds like closed eyes. When the wind came through, something in the alley whistled in a way that reminded me of someone trying not to cry. I moved in on a rainy Saturday in late September. By Sunday night most of my boxes were broken down and stacked by the door. There was nothing on the walls yet. My mattress sat on a simple frame that squeaked if you breathed too hard. The scent of old wood and new paint was in everything. When I lay down, the room made its list of small noises, the fan ticking, the radiator clunking, distant trains, then the softer ones, like breath where there shouldn't be breath. I turned over and told myself to sleep. At 3:11 a.m., I woke because the room felt occupied. No sound. No movement. Just a weight in the air that didn't match the square footage. My eyes adjusted to the light that spilled from the street lamp through the blinds. Lines of pale gray laid across the floorboards, across the end of the bed, across the blanket where my feet were. I didn't see anything at first, and then I realized that my feet were colder than the rest of me, that the air at the end of the bed was colder, that the lines of light were not straight anymore but broken around a shape like knees, like hands lightly extending over the edge of the mattress. I sat up fast and the mattress squeaked in that mortifying way, and the shape didn't move. I reached for the lamp, hand fumbling the chain, heart thudding too loud in my ears. When the light came on the room was empty, just the battered dresser I'd found on Craigslist, the mirror showing me pale and wrecked, my shoes piled in a corner, the fan cutting slow circles out of the air. I laughed, a small shaky thing. I touched my toes. They were cold because they'd slipped out from under the blanket, that was all. I checked under the bed like a child because what if, just what if, only dust bunnies and the black best forgotten corner where the radiator pipe disappeared. I switched the lamp off and lay back. I told the ceiling, out loud, "You're fine." My breath slowed. The seconds stretched. The room settled into that late-night silence again, and the feeling of someone else there returned, as gentle as a thought. I didn't sleep well. Morning arrived in wet gray sheets. I drank too much coffee and told my coworker Jenna that I didn't know why my eyes felt bruised. We stood by the break room window watching rain pattern the parking lot as if the day were trying to remember all the places water could fall. Jenna said, "First few nights in a new place are always weird. You probably woke up because there wasn't the old noise, and now the new noise is, the new noise." She shrugged and smiled and tapped her mug like it could conduct calm into me. I tried to believe her. Night 2, I set my phone on the nightstand with an app that records when it hears sound, because I am the type of person who thinks data will comfort me. I tidied the room as if that mattered. I tucked the blanket tight over my feet. I turned the fan to medium to even out the soundscape. I slept. At 3:17 a.m., I woke because something was watching me breathe. I didn't move. I counted in. I counted out. I told myself, don't bolt upright, because then what? What if something is there and standing will make it closer? My eyes lifted, one breath at a time, toward the end of the bed. The street lamp found the edges of things again, the dresser, the door, the low black gate of the footboard, and within those lines, a darker shape that did not belong to furniture. The negative space of a person crouched, knees tucked, elbows set near its sides, long forearms reaching toward where my blanket rose over my ankles. Not moving. Not breathing. I tried to swallow and my throat made a sound. The shape turned its head. The sound of our building was enormous around the quiet that followed, a pipe ticking far away, someone's fridge kicking on, a car passing on Elm, and inside that quiet a new noise, small and dry, like a finger dragging gently along the top of the blanket, a scratch that barely was. My hand found the chain on the lamp and pulled hard enough to yank it. Light exploded across the room. The foot of the bed was empty. My toes were warm under the blanket. The door was closed. The mirror showed me again, now with a sweat-shiny face and the particular look people get when they are alone and trying to be brave. I didn't want to check the recording in the morning, because I wanted it to say nothing and I wanted it to say something, and both possibilities frightened me. I waited until after coffee. The file labeled 316 contained nothing but the soft white noise of the fan. The file labeled 317 contained a breath I did not recognize, too thin, too controlled, as if someone had learned human breathing from watching and was now practicing. Pause, and then a whisper that wasn't language, only the shape of language, syllables almost, like a mouth remembering the idea of words. I didn't finish my coffee. Jenna's smile faltered when she saw my face. You need actual sleep, Mike. I think someone was in my room. Like, a person. Her eyes moved to my neck as if counting how alive I was. Call the landlord. Call the cops. The door was locked. Windows. Painted shut. And second floor. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe you recorded the TV through the wall. It happens. Maybe. I imagined the breath again, that careful imitation of life. Or maybe I'm losing it. Don't lose it. She said it softly, like it was a thing she could hand me if I dropped it. You should crash at my place tonight. I'm fine. I wasn't. But pride is a poor lock that people love to keep using. Night 3, I slept with the lamp on. Light doesn't solve the dark, it just creates shadows with edges you can see. At 3:17 a.m., my eyes were open already. The room was the color of old paper. The fan threw the shadow of its arms like a slow windmill across the walls. Just to the right of the foot of the bed, the air folded. It is the only way I can say it, the lines that light makes when it hits a room, those lines creased, as if something were kneeling between them again, pale where it was thin, darker where it was dense. The impression of a head tilted slightly. The impression of hands, too long, placed delicately on the blanket as if not to wake me, as if it were learning. I did not move. I counted my breaths because numbers were the only true thing left. A small noise came from the thing, like a foot moving over old paper, and then, so slow I might have dreamed it, it leaned closer. The lamp was on, but the face remained a smudge that light did not want. I whispered, "Go away." It held still. I whispered, "Please." And something about the shape of the head, the angle of the jaw I could not see, suggested that it was listening. The next day I called my landlord, Mr. Klein, a voice like unlit cigarettes. He said the last tenant had been a quiet graduate student who paid on time and left the place cleaner than he found it. No problems, he said. Houses make noise. You'll get used to it. I asked if anyone else had keys. Just me. I asked if the locks had been changed. Before you moved in, he said, and then, like a man tossing a coin and not caring where it lands, but if it helps, I can come by and swap the deadbolt. I told him yes. He came. He was as thin as his voice. He brought a new deadbolt, fiddled with it for 20 minutes, then held up both hands as if to say, "See, sealed." He did not step fully into the room. People can feel a place even if they don't believe in anything. He was careful not to look at the foot of my bed. That night, 3:17 a.m. again, as if the time were a door it could learn to open, the shape returned, closer now, almost close enough for me to feel the difference in temperature where the air sat wrong. It exhaled. My phone on the nightstand turned its red recording on by itself, though I had not opened the app. The thing's hand lifted, that is what it felt like, and a whisper came, a true whisper this time, thin and curious, my name. Michael, not quite right. A practice swing at syllables. I made a sound I have never made in my life, a sound part prayer and part animal warning. My hand scrambled and found the lamp chain and yanked, and light revealed nothing but my blanket slightly crushed where feet would rest. I could not bring myself to touch that spot until morning. When I played the recording, the whisper was there, my name bent around someone else's mouth, then a second sound after it that made the inside of my teeth ache. Imagine a fingernail barely grazing a wineglass rim. Imagine that, but closer, so close you feel the air vibrate in your sinuses. I stopped the audio. I walked into the kitchen and ran the tap until the water was cold enough to hurt. I filled a glass and drank. I called Jenna and hung up after one ring because it was 3:29 a.m. and there is a line you do not cross with new friends, even in fear. I stood by the sink and told the window I was fine, and the night told me back, in the way night tells, that I was not. I tried logic. I stacked it like books. I bought a motion sensor light and put it by the foot of the bed. I bought one of those cheap baby monitors from the pharmacy because they were out of traditional cameras, and pointed it at the bed, at that specific spot. The device made a soft electronic heartbeat noise that should have been comforting and wasn't. I slept with my hand hovering near the lamp chain. I slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow for 3 minutes, then set it on the nightstand because I did not trust myself not to dream into it. At 3:16 a.m., the motion light flicked on, and I sat up because isn't that what we promise ourselves we will do? We will sit up and face the thing, and the bulb glowed steady against emptiness. The baby monitor screen showed my bed, my blanket, the footboard, static like snow. Then the image shivered, as if heat rose, though the room was chilled, and a pale outline, not a body, not a trick of the lens, pressed itself against the edge of the bed as if testing the boundary of fabric. The monitor's speaker hissed. A whisper said, in a cadence like it was reading from a book it couldn't quite see, "Michael, may I watch?" Something inside me said yes. Not my voice, but some lesser, older reflex in the back of the brain that wants the predator to think the prey is willing so it will move slower, so maybe there is time. My actual mouth said, no. The lamp snapped on. The monitor showed nothing but the smooth flat line of the blanket where no pressure had been. The days became a series of bright islands with wide cold oceans between them. I went to work. I wrote emails. I sat through meetings where the hum of the projector sounded like the breath from the recording. I crossed streets and flinched when buses exhaled. Jenna brought me coffee one morning and said my name the normal way, and I almost cried because I needed to hear what my name could be. She asked again if I wanted to crash at her place. I said I had to face my own bed. It sounded brave and stupid at the same time. She touched my forearm, not a romantic touch, just an anchoring, and said, "Don't let it take your sleep." That night I told myself I would not look at the clock, that I would not feed it the ritual. I looked at the clock anyway. 3:17 a.m. arrived like a hand to the shoulder. "Michael," the whisper was closer than breath. The bed shifted in the exact way it would if a patient person leaned onto it with both hands, careful not to make springs complain. I stared at the ceiling because I couldn't make myself look. The fan cranked its old arthritic circle. The whisper tried again, as if tasting new shapes. "May I sit?" "No," I thought. "No. Say no." The word caught in my throat like a fishbone. "Please," it said in a way that was not pleading but copying the shape of pleading. "Why?" I asked, and my own voice sounded like someone else had practiced it. No answer. A tiny scratch at the foot of the bed, as if a long nail touched fabric and then retreated quickly in case I noticed. The room had that feeling of winter hospital waiting rooms, too clean, too bright, the air not quite touching you right. The longer I waited, the more I believed that if I did not look, something worse would happen, that I would teach it that fear is an invitation. I pushed breath into my lungs like I was shoveling coal into a furnace and lifted my head, eyes moving to the footboard, to the blanket, to the shape, to the face that was not a face because light refused it, to the impression of a mouth that did not know what lips should do, to eyes that did not shine so much as return the dull white of the lamp in a way the rest of the world didn't. The shape tilted, curious, almost kind. I did the bravest thing I have ever done. I whispered, "No." The figure froze, the way a deer does when it realizes the road is not safe. Then a motion so subtle I might have imagined it, a small nod, not human in the mechanics, but understandable, then the pressure on the blanket lifted. The room warmed by a fraction of a degree. The space at the end of the bed grew ordinary, like a held breath that someone finally released. I lay there until dawn surprised me in the middle of a sentence I had been trying to think. It did not stop. I began to understand that it had learned me. It knew the time I would wake if it watched. It knew the amount of light that made me brave and the amount that made me a child. It knew the words I would answer to. It began to show up earlier, a few minutes at a time, like an appointment that kept moving up. 3:12 a.m., 3:08 a.m., 2:59 a.m. Sometimes I woke to the sound of the baby monitor crackling to life, the screen a smear of gray, a thin pale hand, longer than it should be, touching the far edge of the mattress and then withdrawing as if the fabric were alive and dangerous. Sometimes I woke because the room was too quiet, the way a field feels after snow. The whispers multiplied but never became language, not really. My name, yes, please, yes, and, once, something so close to hungry that I said out loud, no, and the lights flickered as if the house disapproved. I went to a doctor because I wanted a normal answer. I sat on crackly paper while Dr. Patel asked me how much caffeine I drank and how late I used screens and whether I had a history of sleep paralysis. I did, a little, back in college, not like this, not with the feeling of someone asking permission to come closer. She gave me a brochure about sleep hygiene. She said, night terrors can feel as real as any day. I told her there were recordings. She said, brains are good at seeing patterns in noise. I left feeling like I had asked a locksmith to check a door and they had recommended buying thicker curtains. On the fifth night of this, if it was night 5, time was beginning to slide like eggs on a hot pan, I decided to speak first. I lay awake, staring at the lines the blinds made on the ceiling. When 3 a.m. came, I whispered, don't. When 3:10 a.m. came, don't. At 3:17 a.m., the mattress breathed out a little under a weight that wasn't much of a weight, and the whisper came, Michael, I said, quietly, calmly, like a person leaving a note under a door, no. You can't watch me. You can't touch the bed. You can't say my name. Silence. Then that faint dry scratch, moving back and forth, almost soothing, almost a sound you could fall asleep to if you forgot what it meant. No, I said again. Not my name. The scratch stopped. The air pressed on my teeth. I felt, physically felt, a gaze travel from my feet to my face. It is a terrible feeling, being measured by something that does not blink. Then, so soft it might have been an apology, a whisper not my name, just breath shaped around nothing, and the feeling of being looked at moved toward the floor, toward the doorway, toward the hall, as if it had heard a rule and wanted to see the extent of it. I slept, finally. I dreamed nothing. I woke to sunlight in a room that smelled like wood and dust and the faint burned metal scent of overworked wiring. My whole body shook the way your hands shake after you've carried something too heavy too far and set it down. Later that day I found small marks low on the wall at the foot of the bed. Not scratches that tore paint, more like the paint had been smoothed, in thin lines, as if a very long fingernail had pressed down and been pulled gently, testing the grain. I put my palm there. The wall was cool. I wanted to tell myself that I had done that with my shoe, or when I slid the bed into place, but the lines were at a height and spacing that did not match me. I took a picture and did not send it to anyone. I knew how it would sound, how it would make the thing more real in the world where other people's eyes could see. Some doors stay closed by not naming what's behind them. That evening, the wind came off the sound and chased dry leaves down Perkins Street. Halloween decorations had started to appear, plastic skeletons climbing porches, cheap gravestones in yards, orange lights in windows. The city knew some rhythm of the year that my body had forgotten. I stood at my window and watched a couple in hoodies walk their dog. The dog paused, head up, staring at my building with intent I recognized. It sniffed the air like a person might taste a name. The owner tugged the leash gently and the dog went, reluctant, looking back twice. I closed the blinds and turned the lamp on and told myself it was just a dog, just a dog. That night, I set the baby monitor to record. I set the phone app to high sensitivity. I put the motion light at the foot of the bed and another one on the floor near the doorway. I put a small bowl of salt on the windowsill because my grandmother would have, and though I do not believe, I sometimes believe in the way memory makes you. I sat on the edge of the bed and practiced saying no. At 2:51 a.m., the doorway light flicked on and off. I kept my eyes closed and listened. Soft steps, not quite steps, a sound like cloth sliding over wood, like someone remembering how knees should work. The air changed temperature in a line as if a door had opened in the wrong place. 3:01 a.m. It stood in the doorway, I could feel it the way you can feel a storm cross a field. 3:07 a.m. It moved to the foot of the bed, keeping just to the left of center, as if the center belonged to me by some rule it obeyed without understanding. 3:12 a.m. The mattress breathed again under that almost weight. 3:15 a.m. The whisper practiced. Michael, it paused, listening to the shape of my silence. Please, it said please with no need in it. May I watch? No, my voice was steady. You may not. A pause, and then something like curiosity. The hand I could not see scraped the blanket once, lightly, a question. No, I said again, and then, because I am not just fear, why me? The silence that came was not empty. It was like a room behind a wall you didn't know existed. Something moved inside that silence, choosing. When the answer came, it came wrong, as if the shape had tried on too large a jacket. You are looking. I understood, a little. I had woken and looked at the foot of the bed. I had named the feeling and then stared. I had been a door ajar. Monsters are efficient, they choose open doors. "I am not looking anymore," I whispered. It shifted, and in the baby monitor's screen the image wavered as if heat passed in front of the lens. The whisper came again, smaller this time. "Teach." "What?" A scraping patience. "Teach me not to." I did not know whether to laugh or cry. The lamp chain was cool in my fingers, a life raft I did not pull. "You stop by not doing. You stop by leaving." A long, shivering moment. "Leave, where?" "Anywhere else. Not here." "Hungry," it said, in that same practicing tone, and something in the wall behind the headboard popped like a knuckle. No, the word felt thin. "Not me. Not you." The whisper rolled the syllables like marbles. Another, "not." The mattress lightened beneath the weight. The air lifted from my teeth. The baby monitor's screen steadied, and then the motion light at the doorway flicked on and off again as if a person had crossed and vanished. I slept badly. I dreamed of empty sidewalks. In the morning, I checked the recordings. The baby monitor showed a distortion at the foot of the bed that resolved into the suggestion of long fingers and then not. The audio app captured my voice saying no, and then, in the next file, a thin high whine that made the dog in the yard below bark, then bark again, then go silent as if disappointed. For 2 nights after that, nothing came. I put the knife back in the kitchen drawer. I let the lamp be off. I woke at 3:17 a.m. out of habit and only saw the room, the friendly ordinary ruin of my life, the pile of laundry that needed folding, the shoe half under the dresser like a bad secret. On the 3rd night, around 1 a.m., a siren howled past on Elm and died somewhere too soon, and I thought, for one chasing heartbeat, that I had heard my name in it, because once you hear your name in the wrong mouth you keep hearing it. I slept again. On the 4th day, the neighbor across the hall, an older woman named Mrs. Donnelly with a face like paper left in a book, asked if I'd heard anything strange. We stood with our doors mostly closed, only politeness keeping them open. "Someone's been in the alley at night," she said. "My cat won't go near the back window. He stares and hisses like he's reading a curse. You know how cats are, they can't keep their opinions to themselves." She tried to smile. It landed badly. "You be careful, dear." I said, "I will," and closed my door slowly so I wouldn't seem eager. I put my hand on the smooth smudged lines at the foot of my bed and thought of schools of fish moving when something passes among them. I thought of the dog's twice-turned head. I thought of something that had asked me to teach it how not to look. That night, at 3:13 a.m., a noise came from the alley that was not a cat and not a person. The kind of sound that makes you think of ladders being dragged over shingles, or a rake pulled over dry leaves, a wrong rhythm. I stood at my window and moved a single blind slat with one finger. The alley was a negative photograph of itself, black where it should have been light, too white where the street lamp hit wet spots. Something pale was near the back fence, not in a way that light accepted, but in the way that light had to avoid. It moved like a folded thing unfolding. It turned its head toward my window without the motion of turning. The whisper came in the glass, not through it, in it. "Not you." Then it slipped, not walked, not climbed, up and into shadows under the back porch of the next house as if it had simply remembered that space existed. I did not open the window. I did not shout. I did not call anyone because what would I say, that absence moved like an animal, that something turned hollow places into doors. I lay down and listened to the building think. I waited for the motion lights to flare. They didn't. I waited for the whisper to return to the foot of the bed. It didn't. At some point, I slept, and the kind of sleep I fell into was cold and deep and undeserved. Morning brought ordinary cruelty. There were emergency vehicles across the alley. Yellow tape like cheap ribbon. A woman from the apartment 2 houses down sat on the curb, crying without sound, a paramedic's hand on her shoulder becoming a weight and then a kindness. Neighbors had spilled into the yards in various states of undress and concern. The alley looked smaller than it had in the night. Mr. Klein stood with his hands in his pockets and stared at nothing. I heard phrases float up like pollen and then drift away, always quiet, didn't hear a thing, must have been sick, had no enemies. We all belong to the club of people who pretend there are reasons. Jenna texted me, "Are you okay?" And I wrote back, "I will be," which was true in the way a promise is true until it fails. I worked remotely and clicked my way through a spreadsheet and watched the alley through the corner of the blind. Everything in the scene made sense except for the part of the air under the back porch where light did not quite restore itself. That night I slept on the couch because I am not a hero. I told myself it was because the living room faced the street, which is loud, and loudness would comfort me. At 3:17 a.m., the whisper came from the hallway between the living room and the bedroom. "Michael." It didn't enter the room. It hung there like a question hanging between 2 people who know the answer but do not want to say it. I sat up and the couch springs made their complaint. I said, "No." The whisper tried the word again. "Not you." The hallway motion light blinked on and off, like a heartbeat searching for a rhythm. "Are you going to stop?" I asked, not sure if I meant stop watching or stop other things. Silence. Then, from the dark of the hall, in a tone almost childlike in its exactness, "Teach." I did not know how to teach anything to a thing that had been hunger longer than I had been alive. "You leave whenever you want to look," I said. "You look at nothing. You wait until you have forgotten what looking is." Until, it tried, and then a sound like a long breath that was not in any chest. "Forgotten." "Yes." "How?" "You spend time in the places that are empty," I said. "You stand in the corners and you do not face the bed." I felt insane and practical at once. "You turn around." A small movement, like a bird half turning under the porch. "Turn around." "You do not say names." I swallowed. "You do not take what is not offered." "Not offered," it repeated, gentle as dust. "Do you understand?" I asked, and the old radiator answered with a pop. The thing did not speak. The light at the end of the hall glowed on once more, then died, and with it the feeling of attention, the way you know a call has ended even before the line clicks. I slept. I dreamed of an empty theater where the seats breathed out and in, tiny coordinated movements, like the ocean. Days layered. Leaves turned. The first frost laced the edges of the chain link with glitter that looked expensive and wasn't. I could go a week without waking at 3:17 a.m., and then I would wake on the dot, all my bones ringing like someone had struck me with a tuning fork, and the air would be ordinary and my heart would drum anyway. Sometimes I would feel the house grow alert around that hour, like a dog pricking its ears, and then relax as the minute ticked past. Sometimes, from the alley, a shape of not quite light would move in a way that made me close the blind because I did not want to teach that looking had rules and rewards. Jenna came over once when the sun was a pale coin in the sky and we ate pizza on the floor because I still hadn't bought a table. She looked at the baby monitor camera on the shelf and did not comment. We laughed like people who hadn't earned it. When she left, she hugged me in the doorway in the way friends do on the edge of deciding whether they might be more. "You look better," she said. "Sleeping?" "Trying," I said, and we both let the word mean what we needed. There were nights when the alley felt like a mouth. There were days when the apartment felt like a friend who did not talk. I kept the bowl of salt on the windowsill and replaced it when it clumped. I touched the smoothed paint lines at the foot of the bed every morning, a ritual that felt like both prayer and test. They did not change. I slept with the lamp off most nights now. When I woke at 3:17 a.m., I would sometimes say, softly, to the air, "Not me," and something in the room would loosen as if given permission. Winter came early. The first snow drew white lines across the alley, the fence, the roof angles, made a diagram of the neighborhood like it was explaining itself. I came home late from a long day and stood at the window and watched breath rise from my mouth and not fog the glass because the apartment was cold enough to keep secrets. Somewhere far away a siren wailed the way they do when the air is thin. I went to bed with the comforter heavy over me and a second blanket over my feet, habit more than fear. I fell asleep fast, grateful in the way a person is grateful for anesthesia. At 3:17 a.m., I woke because the apartment was awake. Every pipe. Every board. The fan. The clock. The short stretch of hallway. The kitchen light, even though it was off, felt bright in potential. It was as if the house had taken a breath and then remembered it didn't have lungs. I lifted my head. I felt it before I saw it, the sense of something in the corner near the dresser, turned away, facing the blank wall, the exact obedience of a command I had given. It did not look at me. It did not say my name. It stood like a person imitating a statue imitating a person. It was wrong in the edges but right in the posture. The room tasted like cold pennies. I wanted to say thank you. The words were in my mouth. I swallowed them because I didn't know what you give a thing when you say thank you, what owing it might look like. I lay my head back down. I breathed like a person who knows they are being allowed a thing. The figure did not move. The clock changed to 3:18 a.m. somewhere, far away in another apartment, a microwave beeped. The figure remained, facing the wall, learning how to not look. I slept again, in the sliver of time before anything could go wrong. In the morning, the corner was just a corner. The air was just air. Snow had fallen enough to erase footprints. I made coffee. I sat on the floor and held the warm mug and watched steam climb and vanish. The apartment looked like a place a person could live in. My phone buzzed with a message from Jenna, first snow day. Coffee later? I started to type yes and then paused because a shadow at the window moved in a way shadows don't. I looked. Across the alley, in the house with the back porch, a shape stood in an upstairs window facing into its room, turned away from the glass, a posture I recognized. The light in that room was on. The shape's edges disagreed with the rules of light, the way a negative answers a photograph. A woman stepped into that room carrying a laundry basket, humming, stopping halfway when she saw what I could not see from here but knew was in the corner facing the wall. She set the basket down with care. She spoke, I think she spoke, I could not hear. The shape did not turn. She backed out of the room and closed the door very gently, as if letting a sleeping child sleep. I put my phone down without sending any message. There are nights I sleep as if I am buried and the dark is friendly dirt. There are nights I wake and every part of me is an ear. I have learned certain rules. I do not say my full name out loud in the hour between 2:45 and 3:30 a.m. I do not look long at the foot of the bed, even when the blanket looks pressed where a careful hand might rest. I do not leave bowls of milk or meat because feeding is a kind of invitation that does not end. I say no gently, the way you tell a dog to drop a thing without making the dog think it has done wrong. I keep the lamp chain within reach, but I do not yank it unless I must. I try not to must. When friends sleep over, rare as storms in a dry summer, I stay awake until they are asleep and I tell the room we are not being looked at tonight. Sometimes the room listens. Sometimes I feel a patience in the hall like a train choosing another track, the faint sound of weight moving toward the back stairs, the whisper practicing a different address, not you, not tonight. I say a small thank you in my head and then think about nothing for as long as I can. On certain winter mornings, in that 6 o'clock blue before the world becomes itself, if I look out over the alley, I will see the strange quiet cornered in other windows, in other lives, a person standing in their own home, turned away, facing a wall, the posture of someone who heard a rule and is obeying it, while just behind them, in the part of the room that light ignores, the impression of something not watching very hard. On certain nights, when 3:17 a.m. ticks over and the apartment inhales and then exhales and nothing moves, I will hear the tiniest scrape near the foot of the bed, as if a long nail barely touched the blanket to be sure the rule still holds, and I will say, softly, "Not me," and the scrape will retreat. And in the morning the smooth lines on the wall will be no more and no less than they were, and my coffee will steam, and the day will be a day, and the alley will be an alley, until it is not. Sometimes I wake before the time and look at the ceiling and can feel that I am being spared, which is an awful mercy, spared because something learned what I taught it, because it learned the door to other rooms, because it learned not to say my name, because somewhere near, someone else is learning the lesson too late. I think of the woman with the laundry basket. I think of the dog that looked back twice. I think of the night the air under the porch held a shape the frost could not touch. I imagine how all our houses must look from above, squares of light, growing and shrinking, people inside teaching and being taught by whatever waits in the places we don't look often. I am telling you this the way you tell someone on a bus about a shortcut you learned, the way you tell a friend where the black ice forms first on the bridge in February. Do not look at the foot of the bed too long. Do not say your name when the room feels occupied. If something asks to watch, if it whispers in the calm wrong voice it learned from you, say no. Tell it to face the wall. Make rules and keep them. Do not be cruel, it understands cruelty too well, but do not be kind in the way that feeds. Leave bowls of nothing. Leave the lamp where you can reach it. Keep your feet under the blanket if it helps you. Keep the window closed when the dog looks up and pauses. Keep your eyes on your side of the room and sleep like a person who believes in morning. Because sometimes, in the precise stillness at 3:17 a.m., when the apartment has all its attention on me and I can hear the building ask a question it can't form, I feel the bed shift with a curiosity that is trying very hard to be gone, a press and then a retreat, a hand that almost is, and I say, barely above breath, "Not me," and in the pause that follows, something like a nod moves the air, and the room becomes, one careful inch at a time, my room again, until tomorrow night, until the hour the house has learned, until the lesson holds, until it doesn't. And in the dark I practice the word no. And the ellipses of my breath string themselves together, small lights in a long tunnel, and I am watched from the foot of my bed, or spared, or both, and I do not look. I do not look. I do not look.